Hello and welcome to the Android App Hacking Black Belt Edition. I'm super excited to have you here. During this course, we will learn really complex topics like Smali while having a lot of fun. So we will learn Smali by patching in mobile game to have infinitive lives, be invincible, invisible, we add more than one player shot and many more. But before we can do all of this, we have to set it up first. So I try my best to make this as exciting as possible for you. Okay. The question might be, what requirements do I need for this course? And the answer for this one is absolutely none. Even if you have never ever analyzed an Android application, within this course I will get you from zero to be an absolutely expert in Android app security who can easily deal with people who have many years of experience out there. Alright? Okay. And even if you have already experience, you are still perfectly fine here. You just might want to skip certain chapters like the installation part, but I guess you will find out which one. Alright, back to this one. So no requirements, perfect. What else do we need? Do we need an real device and dedicated laptop? Let's find this out. Okay, if you want to hack an Android application, we need some kind of interaction with the device. The question is now, do I need to get a real device? The answer for this one is no. We can also virtualize the Android system in our system, so on our laptop. But having a real device is a better user experience, and there are also differences between testing on a real device and an emulator or virtual machine. We will have a look into the differences in just a moment. Okay, if you're using a real device, how does the interaction look like? Well, the interaction with the mobile application is then based on USB or Wi-Fi. So we can use both. But to be honest, there's only one solution we should choose. And this is USB, because Wi-Fi, it's really not that stable. Alright, so we simply connect our USB cable, then we perform all of our stuff, and then we can start hacking an application. That's the theory. We will learn more about this in the installation part, the setup part. Okay. So what else can we do based on this USB connection? Well, we can do lots of things. For example, we can use the Android debug bridge to interact with the device. We can use the Java debug wire protocol to debug Java code. We can use GDB to debug native C code, and we can use Frida and many more. So this is by far the best setup, using a dedicated real device and a dedicated laptop for all these tasks. But it's also the most expensive one. In case if you do not have that much money, absolutely no problem, we can skip having a real device. Okay. If you're not having a real device, then we can use virtualization. We can use, for example, the emulator, which comes shipped with the Android Studio. We will learn how to set this up and use the emulator in a separate section. But you can do all of our tasks within this emulator. Beside this emulator, we're having a third option to virtualize the Android system. And this is using a dedicated virtual machine. The virtual machine and the emulator are pretty similar, but we can use them in different setups, which we're going to talk in just a moment about. Alright, so these are our options. Using a real device, using an emulator, and using a virtual machine. In case if you're not having a dedicated laptop for all this testing, we might encounter a little bit of an issue right now. It's doable, but it's not the best user experience. So let me show you what I mean. Okay, the setup that I do not recommend is the following. If you're using a laptop and we're using this laptop for other stuff, then we need to run a virtual machine for our system. So in this course, we're using an Ubuntu system, but you can also use Kali or whatever you like. I recommend using Ubuntu because I have tested everything and it works perfectly fine on the Ubuntu system. Alright. If we are now using a Ubuntu system, we need some kind of virtualization. For example, VMware, VirtualBox, QEMU or other things. These virtualizations are using a hypervisor, and this hypervisor is sharing resources from our real laptop, this one for example, to the virtual machine. So these resources are now being shared between those two. Okay, so far absolutely no problem. This is why we have virtualization. But now, if we are running another virtual machine in our virtual machine, so let's say our Linux VM is now our Ubuntu system where we are installing all these tools, Android Studio and many more, and we are now starting the emulator from this virtual machine, from this Linux VM, then we need another hypervisor. This hypervisor is once again sharing those resources from our already shared hypervisor with the newly VM. Okay, the explanation might be a little bit rough, so therefore let's do it once again. Our real laptop, this one here, is now sharing the resources within a virtual machine, and this virtual machine is sharing those resources with another virtual machine. So this is now a nested virtualization, and this is by far the worst user experience. I have tested the setup during this course and it works. I have used 8 GB of RAM and just 2 or 4 CPU cores. But to be honest, it's definitely not recommended. So that's the worst user experience you could have. The better option would be using a dedicated laptop at least. So in case if you do not have a real device, maybe you have a Linux system already running, then you can use this system. By doing this, we are having our hypervisor once again, okay? But now this time we share those resources only with one instance at a time. So this is perfectly fine. And if you're not having a real device, that's the second best option, okay? All right. Now let's have a look at the differences between using a real smartphone and virtual machine or emulator. I will summarize virtual machine and emulator because these are the same. All right. So let's have a look. Let's talk about root access, smartphone versus virtual machine or emulator. On a real smartphone, it's sometimes not possible to get root access, or it requires a tremendous amount of work and you could also brick your device. Therefore, it's, let's say, yellow. Using a virtual machine or emulator, you gain directly root access. So that's definitely pro for virtual machine. Performance. I mean, on a smartphone, this is the best performance we can encounter. Using a virtual machine or emulator, if you have enough resources, it's also perfectly fine. Next, we have the platform support, and here I mean if all these applications working on both instances. On a real smartphone, of course, yes, and now it's getting tricky. On an emulator or virtual machine, it doesn't have to be the case. So a real smartphone is using the ARM architecture. This is a different one than the virtual machine or the emulator. They are using the same as your laptop, the x86. You could emulate the ARM architecture on your laptop, but this is terrible slow. So this is definitely not recommended. What does this mean right now? It could be the case if you're using an application that it does not run on a virtual machine or an emulator. It just runs on real devices because it's made for the ARM architecture. This is not the case during this course. This is also pretty rare happening out there. I have encountered it, I guess, 5 or 10 times that this was the case, that I couldn't run this application on an emulator or virtual machine. It means if you're using, for example, native C code and you just compile those libraries for the ARM architecture, then it does not run on your virtual machine. For this course, it's absolutely no problem. In case if you want to start your career in Android app hacking, I really recommend using a real device because then you definitely have no issues. All right? Okay. Next, smartphone features, SMS, phone calls, things like this. Real device, of course. Virtual machine or emulator, it depends. So you cannot forward real messages or real calls, but you can fake them. So there are APIs out there where you can send your own SMS or make your own phone calls. But this could be also an advantage because you can test certain things like spamming a lot of SMS without even paying for them. Okay? All right. Up to date? Smartphone, it depends. So if you're using a newer device right now, you should be fine for the next 4 years. Absolutely no problem. Within the emulator, you can choose between different devices and then you can pick the one who has the most up-to-date versions. So that's definitely a pro regarding to the emulator. Price? I mean, a real smartphone is way more expensive than an emulator or virtual machine, which are free. So therefore, this point goes to the virtual machine or emulator. Okay, so far this is the comparison. I mean, both are pretty identical beside the fact that an application might not really just run on a virtual machine or emulator. Then you need to get a dedicated device. In this course, absolutely no problem. If you want to start your career, I recommend getting one. All right? Okay, so this means we can easily move on with the virtual machine or emulator for the whole course out there. All right, let's sum this up because I mean, this was now a lot of stuff. The most preferred setup is using a dedicated laptop and a dedicated device. The second most preferred setup is using a dedicated laptop and using an emulator or virtual machine. And the at least recommended setup is using a nested virtualization. So here it will be a little bit laggy, but it also works. These are the three options we have. Choose whatever you like, and in case if you have questions regarding to one, then please drop me a message underneath this video. Alright? Okay, so I'm looking forward to see you in the next video.
Хотите бесплатно качать дорогостоящее обучение? В Телеграме появился Robinhood, который грабит инфобизнесменов и сливает их курсы по самым различным направлениям. Более 80 тысяч курсов на форуме sv.band. Вступайте в шервудскую банду прямо сейчас и получайте знания бесплатно на канале Sherwood.